Good afternoon. So let's continue with the Ziggurat of Ur saga. When I recorded the previous chapter this morning, it was I was just eating breakfast, and now I'm eating lunch, which is the same, rice and fish. We should thank Google, I think, because we eat. It's a homeless hostel, so we get food from Google. Google Israel in the Electra building in Tel Aviv, so they give us their leftovers Sunday to Thursday. And also we get cakes from Shemo, and that's about it. Anyway, let's speak about. So let's continue with from where we stopped. Okay, so aliens. But these aliens must arrive in big quantities, because there are many of them, and they must arrive in a way that is quick and safe. Because I understood that in order for this arrangement to be so common, even just in Israel, but certainly my assumption is that it's not only in Israel, and of course the assumption is correct. I understood that this cannot rely on spaceships, because even if great parts of the known history of human space exploration is fraud, even if it's true, even if a lot of it is fraud, like even if the there could be all sorts of conspiracies, and there are many conspiracies. It's very unlikely to assume that humans possess starship technology that is considerably better than what is known to the public. It's almost inconceivable. I mean, why should it be the case, and who makes any profit of it? And so the other option is some kind of like gate or a portal. Now, to be clear, I've never seen such a portal in my life until I've seen like the robots that can act as portal with you, under the microscope in the last couple of weeks or months. But this is all speculation, but it was a speculation that only became stronger with time, not because I've gathered new evidence that supports it, but because during my investigation, I had not gathered any new evidence that contradicted or that support other theory. So the whole Venusian theory that I possess now actually lies on the same arguments that I already written. I written about it like during early 2020, actually, in the post that they call the space race. I don't remember the name of the post, but since then I have not gathered no new information. But I did not gather new information that support any other explanation besides the Venusian explanation. But I can say that to this moment I'm not certain that this planet, the origin of the strangers of this on Earth, is actually Venus. I'm 99% certain that it's Venus. And for the same reasons they already outlined back like more than 3 years ago, and since then I have not had any other kind of I have not met any explanation that contradicts it or that supports another kind of like planet or a moon or star system. So I'm still 99% sure that it's Venus, but I'm not. But up to now I'm not certain this is 100% that this is actually Venus. Because I never got like a conclusive evidence until now. This is one of the reasons why I always call these creatures Titans, not Venusians. I mean, I mostly use the word Titans, not Venusians, even though when I say Titans, I mean Venusians. And I said many times, I do not refer to myself as a Titan or Venusian, because I'm not a Titan or Venusian, I'm what I call the Cherub, another race. And this terminology was, I mean, it's not new. I mean, I use this terminology since early 2020 in all my writings and speech. But I prefer one of the reasons, the main reasons that I use the word Titans, not only because of like mythological association, is because I am not 100% certain that this is actually Venus. I've never been there. I've never crossed a gate. I've never seen a gate in my eyes. This is I only speculated about it, but I cannot be 100% certain that it's Venus until I would get a very conclusive evidence, or I'll just pastigate myself, and it's not in my agenda now to do it. And I've never done it in my life. I was born in Earth, and I never passed the gate to Venus, and I've never stepped my feet on this planet. But there were strong arguments why I think that the planet is actually Venus, and the same arguments that I had during 2020. Because I mean it's in the post, and you can just read the post. But I mean, I very briefly I will repeat, like, I mean, I'll repeat the arguments for Venus. First of all, I mean, if some kind of, I mean, of course humans did not create a gate. So another civilization, probably ancient civilization, created a gate, which is, I mean, it's like a nice, I mean, it's okay. I mean, I'm okay with that. It's not it's kind of like amazing, but I mean, it's not impossible. It's kind of like, okay, nice to know. And so if they had this kind of, so I mean, there are two options here. First, that this gate leads to a place in our solar system, and another option is that it leads to a place outside the solar system. Now, if it leads to a place out of the solar system, I have almost no way to know. I mean, I'm in the dark completely. I have no idea where it leads to. Actually, I cannot even have like a shred of an evidence. But I mean, when you have like a new kind of like transportation method, like, I mean, you invented the train, so you start. I mean, it's not. I mean, the first train that was ever. I mean, the first train and like railway did not connect, I mean, the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, right? I mean, even though today I'm certain that there is like a railway between the one railway that connects the Pacific and the Atlantic, but I mean, you start with with smaller ones, so makes sense that they started, whoever they were, that they started with closer planets, and that they started with rocky planets. Now, this is, I mean, and not only rocket planets, but rocket planets that are presumably at some time during the past was habitable. Now this is actually wrong, or that they are now habitable. Now this is actually wrong, and now the last statement I currently do not believe that it's true anymore, because I mean, after the research that I've done during the last 7 months, and especially with regards to life, I am completely abandoned many assumptions regarding like the existence of life that are very common among so many people in Earth, like the Goldilocks zone, I mean, the Drake equation. I mean, I now understand that it's all like a heap of bullshit, and it's not. I mean, in short, life is a phenomenon that is tremendously more complicated than people in Earth think, and it's tremendously more robust and tremendously more, I would say, diverse. Even though, of course, humans understand that life as they know on Earth are very diverse. I mean, there's so much diversity of life in Earth. But even what they know, I mean, as diverse as it is, it's actually nothing compared. I mean, it's actually, I mean, yes, it's amazingly diverse. I mean, there are so many millions of species, and families of species, and I mean, and ecosystems, and so many different. I mean, life in Earth is so diverse. It's kind of like, I mean, amazing. Like, I mean, to think about it. But as amazing as it is, it's actually, I mean, it's very humans look upon all this diversity, and it's misleading them because they think, wow, it's so diverse, so we assume that life on other, whether it's intelligent life or any kind of life on other planets, must be, first of all, must be, like evolve on planets that are somewhat similar to Earth. That's why they invented the whole Goldilocks theory, which is complete bullshit. The Goldilocks zone, which means that it must be like no, I don't. It's not a physics post. I don't want to get into it. So if you don't, I don't. I don't want to develop myself too much. Anyway, looking at the diversity of life on Earth is misleading because you can think, wow, it's so diverse, but it only makes sense that this kind of diversity or even just even just a fraction of it can evolve on planets that are somewhat similar to Earth. But in reality is that life is much more diverse than anyone on Earth probably ever believed. And in reality, life is a phenomenon that is tremendously more diverse, and everything that you know about life in Earth, as diverse as it is, and complicated as it is actually, it's just tiny bits, one tiny piece of the cake that is called life, and the cake is huge. So, in actuality, life can evolve and also, be both in natural selection and evolution, and directed by these engineers or designers in tremendously more diverse environments than humans tend to think to thought, and that's also what I thought, because that's what I was taught. Even in science fiction, So we are taught that the planet should be in this proximity to a star of this type, and there should be carbon and oxygen and whatever. And in reality, nothing of that is true. Nothing of that is true actually. Life forms can actually be created, and even intelligent life forms can live on environments that are incredibly different than those than on Earth, and based on elements that are different, not only on carbon, and even not only on the most liberal of all, futurists tend to think that okay, so if not carbon, then it must be silicon, but in reality life can be created on so many more, based on so many more elements that are not silicon or carbon. And so it's such a diverse phenomenon that humans don't have, they know nothing about life. Yes, they know about life on Earth, and yes, it's amazingly diverse, but as diverse as it is, it's just just a tiny bit of the whole phenomenon that is called life, that is life, including intelligent life. But of course, this is all something that I came to understand during the last couple of months, based on experiments, based on evidence, based on things that I've seen under the microscope, based on hard evidence. It's not like a prophecy. But I didn't know nothing about it. So back in the day, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I thought, yes, okay, so probably the Gates, before they built Gates to Alpha Centauri or to Sirius, they probably built Gates to places that were, according to my understanding, which was completely false, but according to my understanding, were somewhat, probably habitable during the past, and there aren't many options. The first option is Mars. Second is the moon. It's kind of as a star base for Earth, because it makes sense that the moon can be used as kind of like a port to Earth, because also it's not a science video, but it's a known assumption in science fiction, and it makes sense that for future or past advanced civilization, the moon could have been, or would have been used as kind of like a port to Earth. Because it's very easy to launch things from the moon as opposed to, it's because of the low gravity. And and from the moon to the Earth, you can even use the shuttle, it's not a big deal. So what I thought is that there aren't many options. And again, I now understand that this was completely incorrect, but this was what I thought then, 3 or 4 years ago, based on common conceptions that there aren't many options. In reality, there are tons of options in the solar systems. There are so many moons in the solar systems that potentially are habitable by life forms that might be different than humans. But who said that humans are? Humans is just one. You're just one life form. Okay, and not so successful, I should say, and not that intelligent, and certainly, that you do not excel in morality or in ethics. Just one type of monkeys, okay, but in reality, there are many moons, even in this solar system, that can be totally inhabitable by intelligent creatures that are different from you, but still, they are creatures. I'm not saying that this is the case. I say that it's completely a possibility. It is certainly possible. So, and there are so many moons, they can actually, support some kind of life. Europa, Titan, and Enceladus, and so many. But I thought about Mars. But okay, of course, they did not come from Mars, because Mars, you know what's going on on the surface level of Mars, which is not much, because you can actually watch it with telescope, and Mercury, which is presumably not currently or in the past cannot support life, which is also wrong, but that's what I thought. And the only other option is Venus. Now, actually, Venus, the only problem with Venus is that the theory that is kind of like a hell. It's a hell. But so I thought, okay, how do we even know about it? Famously, it's covered with clouds. So we don't really know what's under the clouds. And so it's kind of like and yes, since I was a very young child, I've read that, it's like a 500 degrees Celsius and 90 atmospheres, and whatever, acidic rain and all this bullshit. And so, you read about it since you were a child, so you were sure that it's correct. But, wait, how do we even know that it's true? Because you cannot use a telescope, because, you cannot even use hyperspectral telescope, because they cannot penetrate the clouds. So I was started to think, okay, let's read a little bit about the history of the exploration on Venus. And I was amazed by what I've read. Of course, only open public material. And I was amazed, it hit me like a lightning strike. And it smells like it's so fabricated. It's just, it's when you just open your eyes, it's so manifestly, it's just in front of you. They faked, the Russians and the Americans, they formed a coalition together to hide reality. And there is a specific point of time when it happened, and this is actually interesting. And now and let's get back to it just in a moment, because this is something new that I haven't spoken about in the past, and I want to speak about it now. But what actually the Russian probes actually saw on Venus, because this is an interesting question. But and I want to speak about it, but so we will get back to it. It's a subject on its own, and I've never spoken about it. But just to finish, my thought on Venus, at the time, 3 or 4 years ago, I understood, okay, there is a huge conspiracy here. And actually, when you, if you, kind of if you don't believe if you don't believe the, the samples of the Venera probes, and actually not the first ones, because the first one actually showed other metrics, which is and actually then there was an American, but let's get back to it because this is an interesting subject. But so I mean, starting at some time during the 60s, I mean, the Venera probe started to report these bullshit statistics that doesn't make any sense about the 500 Celsius and 90 atmospheres, and I mean, outside of that, no one really knows nothing. I mean, at all. Up until very late, maybe in the 90s, that there was the Magellan project. But let's speak about it later. This is an issue of its own. But I mean, for many decades, and I mean, the 60s, the 70s, the 90s, I mean, what the world knew, I mean, only relied on on information that was presumably gathered by probes that, first of all, that showed amazing metrics, and they were not consistent with other probes of the same project. And also, it should be said that even though this was a very large project, and it took something like it carried out for something like 20 years until the 80s, the Venera project, and there were maybe 20 probes. I mean, but there was so much supposedly engineering problems. So you can say, yeah, the Soviets, I mean, the stupid Soviet bear, they don't know what they're doing, they're so clumsy. But this is racist, I mean, and I think that much of the conspiracy that is fed to the public is actually, I mean, it stands on deliberately on racist ground against the Russians. I mean, and they knew that there is kind of and they did it. The Russians themselves did it in purpose. They wanted the conspiracy to be believable by the public. So so what they've done in a very clever way, they used racist stereotypes that they knew that are very common outside of Russia, but also inside Russia, to some extent. They knew about these racist stereotypes, and they used these stereotypes to establish their own conspiracy. Because they knew that that the West really liked to portray the Russian engineers that are clumsy, and that they don't know what they are doing, and that they keep doing mistakes, and all sort of things that during the Cold War, the West they like to portray Russians that they are drunk, and you can actually see this stereotype even as late as the 90s, in the Armageddon movie with Michael. I've seen this movie when I was a child, in the cinemas, when they meet the Russian astronaut, cosmonaut, in Mir, and he's he looks like he's drunk and kind of completely clumsy. So this was kind of a racist stereotype that was prevalent during the Cold War. Of course, it was generated by the West, because it's part of kind of propaganda war, and of course the Russians also, they also disseminated the stereotype against the West and against Americans. Of course. That's what they did in the Cold War. Part of what they did is just that. To spread racist ideas, one against each other. So this was one of the ideas that that the Russians are drunk and they don't know what they are doing. And you can even see that as late as in the 90s, presumably that there is kind of an astronaut in space station that is drunk and completely clumsy and doesn't know and breaks everything. So the Russians relied on this kind of views that were already relevant during the 60s. Of course, they were prevalent because the Americans and the West, they had the propaganda machine that disseminated these racist ideas. It doesn't make any sense. It's completely stupid. But nevertheless, that's how propaganda works. You spread, you say the same thing again and again and again and again. You just repeat the same stupid racist lies again and again and again, and people just it's catching, and people just get it. They even without knowing, in a subconscious level, it's just people learn to think of it as reality, but it doesn't make any sense. It's both racist and stupid. But the KGB, they were smart enough to know that this is the situation, and they used the stereotypes that are disseminated against them to facilitate the conspiracy theory that they wanted to actually establish. Not only they, also the Americans and others, but of course that the Russians were a major part of the picture. So they spread so much this information regarding the Venera projects that everything fails. So the camera breaks, and then the camera breaks again. So they send another probe, and the camera breaks again. So they send another. There were like 20 probes, and each of them weighted like a ton or so. It was there like a little spaceship or half a ton. These were huge probes, and there were like 20 of these. So, and then the camera lens doesn't work, and then the camera how to say, like the apartment, like the apart. Like this didn't work, and or the lens cover doesn't open, and eventually after 20 spacecraft, each of them was huge. What you presumably have is only maybe 3 still pictures from the surface of Venus. Of course, all the 3 are fake, but it's amazing. So many years and so many probes, and only 3 still photographs. I want to know how it looks like. So there are only 3, and actually 2 are very, you don't see much. There is only actually one clear, there is a single clear IR, VR, visual range, light, visual range light photograph, or in other words, in layman words, photograph from the surface of Venus. Only one! Because presumably the drunken Russian bear sent so many probes during 20 years, but they couldn't get a photograph. Besides this one and 2 other blurry ones. But that's it. So many probes, so much money, so many years. And every time you get this didn't work, or this was burned, or this was, it didn't open, or it opened and burned, or it crashed to the ground, and this is clearly a conspiracy that was created by KGB, and it, in a very clever way, it relies on racist stereotype that they knew that exist against them, not only in the West, but to some extent in Russia itself, like in the USSR itself. So, this is all bullshit. You can't trust these metrics. So what are the real metrics? I don't know, but it makes sense that the gravity is actually very similar to that of Earth. First of all, this is the part. This is the public information. That is, I think, 0.91, which is very similar to that of Earth, and also it was known since antiquity that these are twin stars, that they are very similar in size and composition. How did they know it since antiquity? I do not know, but I do not completely. I am, as you know, I am not completely hostile to all sorts of ideas of the von Däniken. I've read the Chariots of God of von Däniken when I was a little, a young child, and it influenced me very much. And you can see some influence of von Däniken even with my own term. When I call the name cherub, I mentioned it. It's not that the cherub call themselves. I don't know how they call themselves. I know that I am a species. I'm a third species, which is not Venusians or Homo sapiens. But I coined I didn't call the term cherub, but I chose the term cherub and curve, and this in itself shows you more than a bit of a von Däniken influence on my thought. So yes, I'm not a host. Of course, with a huge amount of skepticism, and if you know me even a little, you know that I'm a very skeptic person. The fact that I speak about divinations and prophecy doesn't mean that I'm the kind of them detached from the ground. On the contrary, as Sherlock Holmes said, our head is open, but our but our legs are they stick very firmly in the ground, stuck very firmly in the ground. I think that I'm more skeptic than almost everyone that you've ever known, because I have to be if I want to create the puzzle. To actually have any chance in creating this puzzle of my life, and I'm alone. I have no intelligence agency ever help me. They only spread this information, and so I must be super skeptic. So I'm very skeptic. But with all this skepticism, since early childhood, I'm kind of I have a place in my heart. That is open to the idea of the von Däniken style. After von Däniken, there were much. They became, even von Däniken himself was quite influential, and he became a millionaire. Because of this book and other books. And after von Däniken, of course, there were many. Up to this day, there's so many successors to his approach of alien archaeology and alien archaeology. Actually, it wasn't actually the first, because you can this actually if you want to find but it was more. It was present in literature. But it wasn't that famous. You can see it was actually found in H.P. Lovecraft, which predates von Däniken by many decades. But Lovecraft was today is more famous. But during the most of the 20th century, no one ever even heard. Was barely people barely knew H.P. Lovecraft. But yes, actually, he predates von Däniken by many decades with these theories. But von Däniken was very famous and became millionaire, and his theories became widespread. And today there are TV channels that only 24 hours a day only show stuff that is related to things that I can call I call von Däniken material. Von Däniken, if I'm not clear, he was I think he's maybe still alive, but if so, he's very, very old. I think in the 60s he wrote a German. He wrote a book that is called The Chariots of God, that became very, very, very influential, and also sold and also made him very rich, and that deals with all sorts of theories regarding connections between ancient human civilizations and aliens. Now, almost everything that he writes on the book is false. The positive thing about von Däniken was not actually, the validity of the theories, because probably 100% of his theories are completely false. But his contribution was not in postulating quote theories, because all of it was wrong. Is wrong, but more of the approach. It's kind of a state of mind, or openness of minds. And much of what many of his mistakes were actually also replicated. So much of what you see in the history, science fiction channels that are direct kind of I would say descendants of von Däniken, they have the same kind of mistakes, should be said. And the mistake is that that they, well, first of all, they want to entertain. They don't care about truth. They want to entertain people. So, whatever. But even people that actually care about truth, the problem is that they completely. They never care about context. They interpret science in language, whether it's kind of it's text or map, or almost any human artifact is made out of signs or symbols. So they interpret signs and symbols according to context that they invent on the place, without this is completely ridiculous. maybe, I mean, one example is that, I mean, on the cover of the Chariots of God, which is the first and most influential book of von Däniken, you can see the tomb of Pakal, from the tomb of his inscriptions, I think, in South America. Pakal was a famous Mayan ruler. Actually, to this date, it's a kind of like conundrum if the body in the tomb actually is, even though it's almost certain that it is, but the problem is that is dated to be pretty young, and he should have died very old because he ruled famously for many decades. And so the tomb of Pakal is kind of like was one of the, I would say, the most known Mesoamerican artifacts. It's amazing, and it's carved in stone. So it's kind of like so you see Pakal like kind of like, I mean, in a sitting position, and like presumably with all sorts of symbols that von Däniken, I mean, so on the cover you see this photograph of the tomb of Pakal, and above it a photograph of an astronaut from Mercury program or whatever, or Apollo, I don't remember. And like, I mean, so, and it's when it's one inside the other, I mean, it looks similar. So it kind of says, oh yes, I mean, this is the depiction of an astronaut, and you see stars, and so, I mean, and the main problem here is not, I mean, the fact that, I mean, how was it even possible that, I mean, the Mayans had any kind of like spacecraft? It doesn't make any sense at all. But also, I mean, there is inherent problem with, let's say you don't know nothing about like the cultures, like, I mean, the material culture, but I mean, you see a sign, I mean, you need to, I mean, when you see a sign or a symbol, you need to have context. And in order to understand what you actually see when you actually watch the tomb of Pakal, you need to know the Mayan language. They had the language. They were the only culture, I'm almost certain that they were the only culture in Americas, both North and South America, that actually had a written language. And this was a very complicated language because it was not like anything that you can find in the old world, of course, because it was developed like in completely different environment by completely different people. I mean, so it's nothing like any kind of like Indo-European or any or Semitic or whatever, I mean, language that people know, because it's not even like a phonetic, it's logographic. So it took, I mean, it took centuries to actually decipher the language. Only during the 1960s, like, I mean, there was some Soviet scholar that I managed to firstly decipher the Mayan language, and because it's incredibly, but you need to know the language. I mean, so I mean, and of course, I mean, von Däniken didn't know the language and didn't care. So in order to understand what you see in the kind of, I mean, on the tomb of Pakal, you cannot like presume to know what's there without like, I mean, without interpreting the symbols. And there are many symbols, and you cannot say, I mean, yeah, this symbol looks like a star, so it must be a star, because this symbol means something. And like, I recalled all of this because, as you know, I myself, I'm kind of like, in a way, it's one of the things they do during the last 2 years that I'm trying to learn. I'm very slowly learning and kind of like symbolic language of the Neros. And they've spoken about it quite a bit, and I actually use this language to communicate with the Neros, like for several months now, and they communicate with me as well. They also they create signs with this language, and it's, as I said, it's also true. I mean, it's the same language that is used for the spaceships. And as I said many times, I mean, I started this kind of like to learn this language about like 18 or 20 months ago, about the same time that I started to paint with acrylic and oil. So it was done together. So I mean, you see many of my paintings contains elements of this symbolic language. And as I said, I mean, for a long time I thought of this language as a way to communicate between me and starships, and this is actually true. But only like later, I mean, when I started like the microscopic research during starting this house arrest, I mean, during this January, I understand that it's also true for the communication with the microscopic robots. of course, with all sorts of adjustments and of course there are many. It's not this communicate with microscopic robots and huge starship is not the same for many reasons. But yes, it's the same language for certain. So I myself, like, I'm kind of like, I mean, it's something that I do. I mean, for quite some time, and it was. Initially, it was extremely difficult. I mean, the first steps are it's still very difficult, but the first steps are incredibly difficult because you need, like, the help of God. Like, you need divinations. I mean, because it's so difficult. I mean, when you start, I mean, it's so difficult. You know nothing. I mean, so it's. I mean, I think that, I mean, the people that actually studied the Mayan language was in some way they had this experience that, I mean, initially if you don't already know it, I mean, and you only know other languages, even if you're multilingualist and even if you're very educated and you know, I don't know, Latin and Greek and German, and I mean, if you know nothing about the Mayan languages, it's incredibly difficult to decipher it. That's why it took so long. I mean, they didn't decipher it until the 1960s, which is very late. So you cannot, like, I mean, decipher what's on the tomb of Pakal just because, I mean, you think that it looks similar to an Apollo or to Mercury astronauts, and you cannot, I mean, assume that, I mean, the symbols, I mean, because you think that they look like stars, they mean stars. I mean, it's a language. I mean, these symbols mean something. You need to study the language, and yes, it's very difficult, but eventually, yes, like a Soviet scholar, I mean, I had a breakthrough during the 1960s, and since then, I mean, more and more people actually deciphered more and more of the language, and it's a language. They had a written language, Mayans. So yes, I mean, if you want to know what's on the tomb of Pakal, you need to study the language, and then, I mean, to read what's on it. I mean, so yeah, this was the Virgin's idea. I didn't plan to speak about it, but it's kind of like, I mean, it's an issue that's close to my heart because, I mean, it's part of what I myself I'm doing, like, in the last 18 or 20 months, yes, and the issue of the symbolic language and so almost everything that von Däniken wrote was false, if not everything. Probably 100% is false. but I mean, the approach, the idea of, I mean, was, and even though he did not invent the approach, he I mean, his greatness was that he popularized it. I mean, many times, I mean, the important person is not the one that invents something, but the person that arrives shortly after the one that invented it, but managed to make it popular. And I mean, it's unfair because, I mean, yes, I mean, because of him it became popular, and it's so popular that today, I mean, there are like entire channels on TV that, I mean, around the clock just, I mean, show content that, knowingly or not, is kind of like, I mean, direct the kind of like continuation of the thought and work of Erich von Däniken. So I'm not entirely all of this, I mean, detour was to say that even though I'm super skeptic and my approach is very, very scientific and very skeptical and rational, I am not. There is like a place in my heart that is open to kind of like von Däniken ideas of ancient cultures that had information regarding the cosmos that could have only be acquired by connection with other intelligence entities that walked on Earth, and the name that I call these entities is cherubs. Again, because and I also call myself cherub, and I consider myself like a reincarnation of one of the cherubs. That were living in Earth, and that I myself, although I've lived in Earth probably many times and probably long ago. I mean, Earth was probably my planet since, either since forever or since very, very long ago, like hundreds, if not many thousands of years. And I use the word cherubs. It's kind of like, I don't know. Maybe if I were Chinese, like in my culture, I would have used like the word dragon. I don't know, but cherubs is something from the mythology. First of all, it appears on the Bible. It's important, and also it's important in Near East, in the cultures of surrounding area, so they are important. I mean, there's a mythological creature that is very important, like in this place in the world. So yes, all of that was to say that the idea that the fact that many ancient cultures regarded Venus as a twin planet to Earth is, I put some weight to this fact. I do not disregard it. I put some weight to it. It's something that should be, taken into account. When we think about Venus. And there can be all sorts of explanation to it. And by the way, even if they actually, some of these people or the people that, that they knew, actually passed the gate, even many times, it still doesn't mean that they understood that it's Venus. I would say that probably they didn't. Probably they just thought it's another place in Earth. Because the conception of Earth itself, as kind of the idea of the celestial bodies as places, places where people actually live on. It existed in antiquity, but it's anachronistic to think that they thought about it the same way that we think about it. Because they had, all sorts of cultures had all sorts of kind of ideas, and if you really, a really rigorous historical examination should be taken the context into account, and the context is always changing. So, but I would say that one thing is certain, that yes, Venus was regarded by many cultures since antiquity as a twin planet to Earth, and I give some weight to this fact. And another issue is that it is difficult to completely lie, to lie very audaciously about the gravity of a rocky planet. Because yes, it's not that all rocky planets are made of the same material. If I'm not mistaken, Earth is actually the one that is the heaviest, per volume, because of the large, the large amount of iron in its core. If I'm not, how do you say משקל סגולי? Weight divided by volume. I think that if for weight divided by volume, Earth is not only, is probably the heaviest celestial body in the solar system, if I'm not mistaken. Because the iron in the core, but you cannot you cannot lie too much about it. You cannot be completely because the size, because it's easy to actually calculate the size of Venus. The size, you cannot lie about the size, because even some of the ancients the mathematics that are needed in order to calculate the size of Venus. So, and it was known since hundreds of years ago, that the size is roughly that of Earth, a little bit smaller, and so regarding the size, you cannot lie. Regarding the weight, yes, you can lie to some extent, but not too much, because it's a rocky planet. So what can you say, that that it's it's made just of iron? If it was true, it wasn't a planet, it was a core. And there are asteroids. There are asteroids that are just they are similar to cores of planets like Venus or Earth, but they do not. They don't have atmosphere. Or if it's a rocky planet, you cannot lie tremendously about its weight. So it makes sense that it makes sense that I don't know, משקל סגולי. How do you say משקל סגולי? Weight divided by volume, total weight divided by total volume, of Venus is approximately that of Earth. It makes sense. So the gravity measurement of 0.91 is probably, if not true, is close to true. It's difficult, and that's why it wasn't actually manufactured. That's why, I mean, it wasn't part of the propaganda that was created by the KGB and the CIA, because they understood that they cannot lie too much about it. They cannot say like, no, Venus, like they have like a 5G gravity, or I mean, it doesn't make any sense. How is it possible? Like, I mean, so you should have like, I mean, what? I mean, how is it? It's all made of iron, like a huge. So how come it gets got like an atmosphere? Because the atmosphere, I mean, not only the existence, but I mean the consistency of the atmospheres. I mean, atmosphere is part of the ecosystem. It can, there are relations between the matter on the atmosphere and the matter on the ground, on the consistency of the ground. So it just, I mean, it doesn't make sense that it's all like it's a huge iron planet. It doesn't make sense. Like, I mean, because and then there should be like presumably like a huge magnetic field and a whole sort of things that, I mean, couldn't be explained. Just couldn't be explained. So you cannot say that they have 5G. So they say, yeah, they had like 90 atmospheres, which is incredible, and of course it's not true. Like on the ground, 90 atmospheres on the ground. But I mean, yes, you can lie about it. I mean, and it's, I mean, people, I mean, it's something that can, I mean, it's amazing, but it's still believable, and I mean, all of us believe in it, actually. And I mean, you can lie about like, I mean, temperature, because actually, the problem with temperature is that back in the 1960s, is up until today, people, I mean, scientists do not understand. It's kind of like one of the mysteries in cosmological and like science is to predict and like to understand. I mean, what's the temperature on planet, like on the surface level of planets. And it became, since the 1960s, it became much more interesting because of the whole issue of global warming on Earth. So, I mean, people start to understand that, I mean, that humans actually, like the actions of humans actually affects the temperature on Earth. So so it became like, you know, so it's a huge political issue. I mean, all of you are, I mean, I do not need to say too much about it, but I mean, but it's really very difficult. It was incredibly difficult in the 60s, and it's still difficult today. Like, I mean, there's still so much to be learned for humans. Like, I mean, to understand like why is the temperature on the planet the way that it is. It's not simple at all to actually, I mean, you can send a probe to actually check. I mean, to measure it, but I mean, just if you don't like send any probe, it's very difficult. I mean, to actually, I mean, get like a good approximation of the temperature. Of course, I mean, if you Google, like, I mean, maybe you can like get like a temperature, like, I mean, also approximations of the temperature, like on moons that are far away, like, I mean, moons of Saturn or moons of Jupiter. But I would say that unless, like, if it was not, and maybe actually was probed, I mean, so if it was probed, okay, but I mean, unless, I mean, the probe lie, because as you know, I mean, people, I mean, the space agencies lies about the measurements of the probes, but I mean, if the temperature that you see like in Wikipedia was not something that was received from a probe, but it was calculated, I can tell you this almost certainly it's not true. That, I mean, that there is a huge like a margin of error, almost certainly. Just because humans don't know, even now, and certainly not in the 60s, but even now, they don't know. Like, it's kind of like something that people, I mean, science, I mean, humans are just, I mean, they think that they know everything, but actually, I mean, they had like the first step in science. Everything that they did is just, I mean, one step, and So one of the things that they don't know is to predict temperature, like, I mean, unless you send a probe. So yeah, it was, I mean, so to say, yeah, it's 500 Celsius, which is amazing and untrue, but people didn't know better then, and they don't even know better now. Like, I mean, it's very difficult to, without probes, to actually say if it's true or not. But I mean, they couldn't lie regarding gravity. Again, because of the size and of the fact that it's a rocky planet with atmosphere, and this is a huge constraint. I mean, what can you say? I mean, that it's made. I mean, if it was all made out of iron, I mean, so it was an asteroid. I mean, it would completely and it had like completely different like magnetosphere and completely different atmosphere. And if it so it just, I mean, it doesn't make sense. So on the other hand, you cannot say that like the gravity is like 0.1 g. Like, I mean, so what? It's made of cotton candy. Like, I mean, it's made out of like or cheese. Like, it's like, I mean, a planet made out of cheese. How can it be that large? I mean, with such a small gravity. So I would assume that yes, the gravity is probably similar to Earth, which actually makes it. And gravity is incredibly important, not for the existence of life, because as I've said, I've learned to understand that almost any constraint that when people think about like that constraint about life is false, and life is so much more diverse and human know that, I mean, it's like that all the theories regarding that, I mean, the Drake, everything, almost everything that, I mean, almost every part of the famous Drake equation is wrong. Like, there is a XKCD comic. XKCD is like the comic strip that, I mean, the nerdish comics, the internet comic strip. So they had like a couple of years ago, they have like an explanation of the Drake equation. So there are like 10 coefficients. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, this kind of like a percentage of planets that are, I mean, in the Goldilocks zone. Percentage of planets with atmosphere percent, and like so. And the other variable, and the last variable is like, I mean, is I mean, like in the legend, I mean, it says, I mean, the amount of bullshit that you are willing to eat from Drake. XKCD comic. So it's true. I mean, the Drake equation, I mean, is an equation that, I mean, every part of it is wrong. Like, I mean, every element of the equation is just wrong. But it's, I didn't want it to be. I mean, it turned out that this is. I mean, I will still categorize it under the Ziggurat of Ur, because yes, it relates to my origin story, but it became a very scientific post, and it actually wasn't my intention. All of that was to say that I want to say that gravity is incredibly important for the biomechanics of the creatures that can be found on the planet, and it doesn't matter if they are natural according to any kind of like definition of natural that you have, or that they are synthetic or robotic or artificial. These are all synthetic definitions, but whatever, it doesn't mean, I mean, what does it, I mean, a muscle is a muscle, like, I mean, so whatever they are synthetic or not, I mean, or natural according to definition, gravity poses like a great restrictions on how the biomechanics will actually be able to operate, which means that creatures that have the basic biomechanics of humans, and I mean, obviously the strangers are like that. I mean, you can see them all around you, and they have the biomechanics of humans. It's almost certain that they are used to environment with the very, very similar gravity. It doesn't mean that life and intelligent life cannot evolve or designed or live in environments with 0.1 G or 5 G or anything in between. But it will just mean that the biomechanics will be very different. That's what it means. And probably it will be very difficult for intelligent life form to evolve on a planet that was very, with more than 2G, I would say, or 3G, because they will have a huge problem with mining. Without mining, it's very. I don't see how can they how can they become technological civilization. Even 1G is kind of like a lot for mining in Earth is actually difficult. I mean, most people don't think about other options, but actually it's very it's one of the problems in Earth. I mean, is that it's a difficult place for mining to get things out of. There are still plenty of people, even to this day, humans, that's what they do for a living. That they just, with their own hands, without machines at all. Just, maybe, hammers or axes, but that's it. That's what they do. All around the world. That's what they do. They just go and, they mine things from the ground, and up to this day, many people are like it, and actually, and the ability to do so, is related to gravity, and actually, 1G is kind of, that's what you know, but it's actually a lot, for mining. If it was like 0.6G, it was much easier for mining experiment, for all mining purposes. It's another reason why, many people think the moon can be a good, spaceport for Earth, presumably to support also, because, it's much easier to, not only to launch things for the moon, but also to, to create all sorts of, facilities, that are needed to create ships that are no, the moon is not enough even the moon is not enough for ships like that one. But when you start to understand, what kind of starships are used by grown-ups, not by narcissistic monkey apes children, narcissistic children apes, but by adults. What kind of starships are used by adults? You understand that, you probably need things like the moon. So, Venus. Now, nothing is new, and I've written about it already 3 years ago, and since then I didn't have any new information, and all of that caused me to believe that actually the Titans, the strangers, are Venusians, and I'm 99% certain that the Titans are actually Venusians. But as I said, to this day I am not 100% certain, because I never got a conclusive evidence. I should just say that during the last 3 years, I haven't spoken to them about it a lot. It wasn't very important part of my journey, because my journey is everything that I do is related to Earth. I'm a messenger of the cherubs to Earth. So presumably, if the Titans didn't come from Venus but from another star system, or I don't know what, or from another place in time, or maybe a parallel universe, or maybe they come from the bottom of the Earth, in the absurd Jules Verne novel, there is life in the bottom of the in the underground of the Earth. It wouldn't really almost everything that I speak about wouldn't change at all, or everything. Because it doesn't matter. Why? Who cares? Who cares? It's important. It's interesting, but not for the. I during that 3 years, I spoke about the crimes of not only of Israel, but of other humans, of other immense crimes that are done against innocent people, including my own self and my own daughters that are. We are tortured, and all of this. Why does it matter if? Does it really matter if the Titans came from Venus or from Mars or from, I don't know, Alpha Centauri B, whatever? So it wasn't very important for anything that I've spoken about during the last 3 years, if the Titans really came from Venus. So it was my assumption during the last 3 years, and it's still my assumption, and I can only say that during the last 3 years, this assumption actually got stronger, not because I got new evidence, but because I didn't get other evidence. Because if you don't get if you investigate something and you do not get any evidence that support other theories, it's also in some way it's strengthening your the current theory that you hold. So I have never received any evidence, like, or kind of like a shred of an evidence that why the Venus theory is wrong, and I didn't get any evidence that supports the idea that Titans arrive from another place which is not Venus. So more than ever, I am now convinced that the origin planet of the Titans is really Venus. But having said that, this leaves us with certain questions, some questions that I was aware of this question back in the day, like 3 years ago, when I wrote about this theory, and these questions never found any answer, and they present some kind of like, I wouldn't say like a hole in my theory, but I would say call it like a lacuna, as they say. I mean, a gap, something that, I mean, kind of like, I mean, there is something missing here that, I mean, and there is a kind of a missing part, an important missing part of the theory that is missing, and the fact that it's missing does not discredit the whole theory. That's why I'm still certain, as I were back in the day, that the Titans actually came from Venus. But I was aware of the fact that this theory that I outlined in the post 3 years ago leaves kind of like, I mean, a huge gap that should be filled, and I was not able to fill it in the last 3 years, and I wasn't very much inclined to do it because it was, again, not very important part of my mission. And this missing part is the relationship between the interplanetary situation of Venus and Earth, a situation that I understood was probably, that there were the connection between the planet existed probably since antiquity, even though it's not pertinent. This is related with the Fundenican, realms, and it's not pertinent. But I understood very well that during it was like that during the 20th century. I still did not understand the relationship between the Zionist project and the Venusian exploitation. I only understood it later, even though I immediately postulated, hypothesized that yes, at least one gate exists in the land of Israel, because otherwise, why are these? At the time I didn't hate Israel as much as I hate it today, but I understood that this is a tiny piece of crap land. So who cares? Why should they even take any kind of why should there even be any kind of actors of meaningful actors in interplanetary drama? Why should the superpowers or any other states would in this world even care about the Israelis with regard to things that are so important as relationship with another planet? So the only kind of solution that I had back in the day, 3 years ago, and I still think that it's true, is that because there is actually a gate, probably more than one gate in Israel, in the land of Israel, but I still didn't understand back in the day the relationship between the existence of the gate and the history of Zionism. But I did understand that it's something that takes place throughout the 20th century, and immediately, and of course, it's related to the nature of the intelligence organizations of the West. This is where I started from. I started from this direction, from inquiry into the nature of intelligence organizations in the West. So there is one thing, is that the interplanetary situation during the 20th century up until the 1960s. But on parallel, there is this Venera project of space exploration that started during the 60s and continued until the 80s. And even after that, there was another important project that I think was called Magellan during the 90s. And the question is, how are these two things related to each other? Because I had very strong reasons to believe that, of course, many aspects of the Venera projects are fake and fraudulent, but I believe, and I still believe, maybe I speak about it in another post because this post is too long, but so we'll just end with that. My immediate intuition, it wasn't only intuition, it was, I had reasons to, it was intuition mixed with, rationalization, was that the Venera project, of course, it's all, it's a heap of bullshit, but that it was actually a project. That yes, the USSR actually conducted like a space, they had a space program that was named Venera, and it was actually a space program. It was part of the Soviet space exploration, and in the case, it cost them a lot of money and assets, and they put great effort in it. And so yes, and it took place for 20 years, yes, and they sent many probes, like something that, they had in total maybe 20 probes. Yes, I believe that all of this, I believe that this is true. And I also, my intuition was that this is not kind of like a cover-up project for Venusian exploration that might have taken place on parallel. Like maybe the Soviets had also like another parallel project of Venusian land exploration, using the Israeli gate or any other gate, because I didn't know then that 3 years ago, but now I know that the Soviets actually had another gate in the Ukraine that they could use and they have used. I didn't know it then, but I thought maybe they used the Israeli gate. Never mind. So maybe the Soviets also had like another project of Venusian exploration, maybe during the 60s or the 70s or whatever, or the 40s, I don't know. That it was also done in parallel, but this is kind of like another project, like a land exploration project. But my intuition, and I'll end with that, my intuition, and I've had very good reasons, it's not just, kind of like a guess. It was actually, I had rational reason to believe that the project is called Venera, even though so much of what is a web of lies. This is, yes, it was actually a Soviet space exploration project, the way that, we understand it. That it was done by spacecraft. Space exploration project that was done by spacecraft, and yes, these spacecraft were actually called Venera 1, 2, 3, 2 up to 20. Yes, this actually is true, and I still believe that this is true. So the question is, how are these two related? How is this space project related to the relationship between the planets that are carried out, by foot, just by land? How are these two related? Because presumably, and we should end with that because this video is really too long now, so I'll continue in another video, because yes, I immediately understood that the Venusians should be, inferior to the people of the Earth in their technology and in the sophistication of their political system, because it's obvious that, the Earth are their owners and the Venusians are the slaves. And it's not a symmetrical relationship, and why should it be? It's all in space. It's never symmetrical. There is always one side that is much stronger, because from statistical probabilistic reasons. And it is certain that the people of the Earth are the stronger side, because they are the one. Because they are the one that bringing the slaves here, not the other way around. So they must be less technologically advanced than humans, and if so, from probabilistic reasons, it makes sense that they are much more inferior than humans. Again, because it will be an unbelievable coincidence that they will be approximately at the same place in the technological tree, unless they were always in strong, in tight connection, which of course is not true, because otherwise, people would have known that. This could have been like it's certain that the connection between the planet, even if it was actually continuous for thousands of years, it was only very minor thing. Then just very few people knew about it, because otherwise, if it was really, like another continent, how could you have kept it a secret? So these are two planets that were not developed together. So and one must be superior technologically to the other, and we know that the superior side is Earth, because they take the slaves from there and not the other way around. So mathematically, it must be the case that they are significantly less developed than humans from technological point of view, and also from the political, from the sophistication of the political system. Probably Paleolithical, or things that or comparable to what we say when we speak of Paleolithical cultures. And all of this I understood it immediately, like 3 years ago. It wasn't something that took me a lot of time to understand. I understood all of that when I wrote this post, like in my blog 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. But if this is the case, why do you need spaceships or probes? What? And this is a lacuna. It's not this question, even though I have no idea about the answer back in the day, and actually now I understand it much better because of new information that I now have. But 3.5 years ago, I had no answer to this question, even though I understood the question. But I consider this question to be not important enough to disqualify the whole theory and to prompt me to search for an alternative to the Venusian theory regarding the origin of the Titans. I understood that it's a big question. It's a big question. Like, it's a big part that is missing in the theory, but it's not big enough to disqualify the theory. So even though I didn't understand the answer to this question, I still, during all this time, I maintained that probably 99%, probably the Titans are actually Venusians, and the other planet, the planet of the strangers, is actually Venus. And this is still my assumption, even more than before. Because the question, even though I didn't have it's not incredibly important. It doesn't disqualify. The theory, the fact that I don't have an answer to this question. But yes, indeed, it's a question. Assuming that the Venera project, and we are not 100% sure, but I had good reasons to believe that the Venera project was, even though it was all shrouded in mystery and, of course, disinformation and lies, yes, it was indeed a space exploration project that was done by spacecraft. This is correct, and it was a large project. It was carried out by the Soviets with a lot of money and assets, worth a lot of time, like many years. Yes, this is true. This was, I'm not sure about it, and I wasn't sure about it, but I had good reason to believe so. And at the same time, I understood that for certain, the Soviets know about, of course, that, they are part of, the interplanetary relationship with Venus, which means that either they send people to Venus, or for certain they know, certainly, even if they didn't, certainly it only makes sense, even though I knew nothing about the history of the exploitation, but, I knew that there are many Venusians, many Titans on Earth. It was obvious to me. So, it all makes sense that some of them arrived, on the USSR at some point. I didn't know how many, and but it makes zero sense that no one, no Venusian ever set his foot on the USSR. It doesn't make sense. And that no spy of the USSR, and they had famously, they had the largest spy network on the history of Earth, so they didn't know about the existence of Venusians. It doesn't make sense. And yes, now I know much more about the history of the exploitation and the relationship between the USSR and Israel, and I know now many things that they didn't know then. But I knew that that the relationship did not start after the 60s, but before the 60s, and the Soviets had some kind of information about what's going on, and probably they had like people from Venus in the USSR that they can speak with them, and maybe they even have like their own like land expedition on Venus. And and any of that could have like immediately confirmed to the Soviets that this is a Paleolithic planet. Even if they don't have many Venusians, even if it's just one that ever reached the USSR, or even if only spy of the USSR that had gathered information regarding the Venusians that presumably live in Israel or other places in the West, even that is enough to get like the basic idea that these people are Paleolithic. And again, there aren't many options, because either that they are more advanced than Earth, or that they are less advanced. And if they are less advanced, and this is the situation because they are the slaves of the people of the Earth, not the other way around, mathematically, it means that probably they are much less advanced than the people of the Earth. And this, and the Soviets were they were smart enough to understand, and I was certain that the Soviets are smart enough to understand it. They understood what I understand now. So they understood that this is a Paleolithic planet. And they also understood that there is a way to actually get to, if they want to the planet, by, in a much simpler way than using spacecraft. By just, invading the planet, as it was done by Israelis since the beginning of Zionism, and also by the Soviets using the Ukraine gate. I didn't know about it, but it is not pertinent. But if they know that it's a Paleolithic planet, and if they know that they have way to actually invade the planet if they want to, and certainly to conduct expeditions, because even if the only gate that existed on Earth is in Israel, and even if it was for some reason a major objective, maybe just a future objective of the USSR to invade Venus, for some incredible reason, even then it would have been much easier to do it from Israel than to actually, fly forces, using spacecraft to Venus, something that humans even now are not even close to actually be able to do. Even now, it's so far off from something that people can actually do even now. Like even today, people don't have like the starships that are needed to place humans on Mars or Venus, which is about the same. It's actually more difficult on Venus, because if you want to get back from there, you need to you have this gravity well, which makes it much more difficult. But they don't even know how to do it to Mars, which is easier. Yes, Elon Musk, etc. But it's like since the 70s, they always say in NASA that in 10 years the man will be like landed on Mars. But it's always like 10 years from now. But it keeps like being 10 years since the 1970s. So yeah, we've heard enough of this. And Mars is easier than Venus. So even if the only gate that the Soviets knew about was the gate in Israel, which is not true, and even if it was for some reason a major future objectives for some reason to invade the planet, even then it's much easier to do it from Israel in any kind of like political constellation than to actually start like a project that presumably will be able to do it like from using spacecraft. This is something incredibly difficult even today. It's not difficult, it's possible even with today's technology. So why did they send the probes? Why did they send all this? What was so interesting? Like, what did you want to know that that was so interesting? And it's not that they didn't have other things to think about. As I should remind you, this was the 60s. There was presumably a major race to the moon, presumably. So why not direct your efforts to the moon? Maybe beat the Americans in their own whatever they did on the moon. Like they played golf and they drove their rovers. Actually, it should be said that the Luna project was very successful, and it's also something that should be actually, because history only remembers, the first, the one that got the gold medal, not the silver. As they said, no one knows the name of this, the second in command after Bar Kokhba. It's something that they say in Hebrew. Bar Kokhba was, famously, the leader of like a revolt against the Romans. So so you don't remember the second place, but actually the Luna project was kind of like done in parallel to the Apollo project. Was actually, with disregard to the Apollo project, it was actually a very successful project. The Soviet actually did amazing things in the part of the Luna project, but people don't remember it because the Apollo, was more successful, at least in the important parameter of so people only, they remember the Apollo program and not the Luna program. But actually, it should be said that the Luna program was also in itself, with disregards to, to the race with the Apollo program, was actually very, 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 very successful project. Again, just to say, why do people, just to show you how much racial stereotypes stick, how people are, even if without their knowledge, they are so prone to racism, and the Soviets, they used that, they understood, that was, the satanic cleverness of the KGB, that they understood that there is that the West, is spreading racist, stereotype against them. They are presumably they are all drunk and they are clumsy and even in space they don't know what everything doesn't work. So they use it in order to facilitate the cover up for the Venera project. But of course it doesn't make it's both racist but it doesn't make any sense. The Luna project, which was done on parallel to the Venera project, was very, very sophisticated, and actually they managed to do great things in the Luna project. And some of the things that they did in the Luna project were actually the Americans didn't actually do, and some of the things that they do weren't replicated until now. So the Luna project was very successful, even though people don't remember it because it was done in parallel to the Apollo, and the Apollo was, the one that is considered like the first place. So why am I mentioning all of that? Because it's not that the users were they didn't have what to do with their money. Or even that even only regarding space exploration. If they could have. If Venus wasn't interesting from the space point of view, because they had land, presumably they have land access to it, and it's Paleolithic. Why did you spend money on the Venera project, money and effort and engineering capacity, where they could, they could have just used the money to buy, to get better living condition or more food for the people. But let's say that, it's not something that, that you cannot divert resources from here to there. Maybe space exploration received this kind of money, and you cannot divert resources to other stuff. Even then, they could use this money and resources to push further the Luna project, which was taking place. At least in the first half of the era of the Venera project. The Luna project was another major project, even more famous than the Venera project. So they could use these assets to push the Luna project even further. And I said the Luna project was a successful project. So it's not because it wasn't that it was a waste of money to put more money on it or on the efforts. So they had all of this is kind of hints that there is something missing here. Something that we don't understand regarding the nature of Venus. Because why should the superpower use their space exploration money instead of the Luna project, which was very successful and important, and was at the forefront because of the famous war with the Americans and the famous space conflict with the Americans, the time of the Apollo, the moon. So they can use the money there. So why, use this money instead of in the Luna project? Why did they use it on the Venera project? And presumably, they could have just, if they wanted to know something about Luna, about Venera, about Venus, they can just, either just walk and go watch it with their own eyes, or maybe use one of their many spies in Israel to get the information, because in Israel there were many people that, I mean, knew about this information, and many people actually had the trip to Venus in Israel, and there were so many spies of the USSR in Israel back in the day, and still today, and always. What could have been like interesting from this space point of view, taking into account that this is a Paleolithic planet? Okay, so this was quite a long, lengthy video, 90 minutes, too long. I don't like videos that are so long because people don't have patience usually. So let's stop here, and we will continue in another video after I take some rest.